I found out on Facebook that my son got married and I wasn't invited. Can you imagine realizing that your son planned an entire wedding, invited dozens of people, celebrated with family and friends, and never once thought to mention it to his own mother? My own son did this to me, but what I did next shocked everyone who knows me. I was scrolling through Facebook on a quiet Tuesday morning, sipping my coffee and watching the rain tap against my kitchen window, when I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. There it was, right in my newsfeed. A photo of my son Michael in a black tuxedo, standing next to a woman in a flowing white dress, both of them beaming with joy. The caption read, "Just married, best day of our lives," posted 3 hours ago. My hands started trembling so violently that I almost dropped my phone. 26 years of being his mother, of sacrificing everything for him, of believing we had a close relationship, and I had to find out about his wedding through a social media post like any random stranger on the internet. The woman in the photo was Jessica, his girlfriend of 2 years who had always been polite but distant with me. I remembered the last time we had dinner together just 2 weeks ago, when Michael mentioned they were thinking about the future, but never said anything about an actual wedding. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred with tears, zooming in on every detail. The beautiful venue I didn't recognize, the happy faces of guests I'd never met, the elegant decorations that someone else had chosen. There were at least 40 people in the background, all celebrating the most important day of my son's life, while I sat alone in my kitchen, completely unaware that it was even happening. I scrolled through the comments with shaking fingers, seeing congratulations from relatives I knew, family friends who had watched Michael grow up, even his old college roommates. "So beautiful," wrote his Aunt Sarah. "About time," commented his childhood friend David. Everyone seemed to know except me, the woman who had raised him single-handedly after his father walked out when he was only 8 years old, the woman who had worked double shifts at the diner to pay for his college tuition, the woman who thought she meant something to her only child. What hurt even more than being excluded was realizing that this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was planned. The venue was too elegant, the decorations too elaborate, Jessica's dress too perfect for something that happened overnight. They had been planning this for weeks, maybe months, and at no point did my son think to include his own mother. I felt like I was looking at the life of a stranger, not the boy I had tucked into bed every night for 18 years, who used to call me his best friend. But what I discovered next would shatter my heart into pieces so small I wasn't sure they could ever be put back together again. I clicked on Jessica's profile with trembling fingers, and what I found there made my stomach drop even further. Photo after photo of wedding preparations that had been going on for months. Her trying on different dresses with her mother and sister, all of them laughing and having the time of their lives. Venue visits with Michael, cake tastings, flower arrangements. An entire wedding planning journey that I had been completely shut out of. The most painful photo was one from just last week. Jessica with her bridesmaids at what looked like a bachelorette party, all holding champagne glasses and wearing matching pink shirts that said, "Jessica's last fling before the ring." Her mother had commented on every single photo with heart emojis and encouraging words. "My beautiful daughter," and "can't wait for the big day." I realized that Jessica's entire family had been part of this journey while I, the groom's only parent, had been treated like I didn't exist. I scrolled back through months of posts, looking for any sign that I had missed, any hint that this was coming. But there was nothing directed at me. No inclusion, no acknowledgement that Michael even had a mother who might want to be involved in the most important day of his life. I picked up my phone with shaking hands and called Michael's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Michael. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." His cheerful voice sounded so normal, so casual, like he hadn't just excluded his mother from his wedding day. I hung up without leaving a message, my throat too tight to speak. What was I supposed to say? "Congratulations on getting married, son. Sorry I found out on Facebook like a complete stranger." The silence in my kitchen felt deafening. I looked around at the photos on my refrigerator, pictures of Michael's graduation, his first job, family vacations we'd taken together. Had I been living in a fantasy, thinking we were close when he clearly saw our relationship very differently? I thought about all the times he'd called me for advice, all the Sunday dinners we'd shared, all the moments I'd believed we had a genuine bond. Had it all been an act? Had he just been going through the motions of being a loving son while planning a future that didn't include me? But the real shock was yet to come, because when I finally got through to him an hour later, his response would reveal just how little I truly meant to my own child. When Michael finally called me back, his voice sounded different, distant and slightly annoyed, like I was interrupting something important. Hey, Mom. Sorry I missed your call. Jessica and I are at the airport. We're heading to Bali for our honeymoon. The word honeymoon hit me like a physical blow. Not only had they gotten married without me, but they were already moving on to the next phase of their lives while I was still processing the first devastating revelation. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady as I asked the question that was burning in my throat. Michael, honey, I saw on Facebook that you got married. Why didn't you tell me? The pause that followed felt like an eternity. I could hear airport announcements in the background, the hustle and bustle of people going places, living their lives, while mine felt like it was crumbling around me. Oh yeah, about that, he said finally, and his casual tone made my heart sink even deeper. It was really last minute, Mom. We just decided to do something small and intimate. You know how Jessica's family is about big parties. They hate all that fuss. But I had seen the photos. I had counted at least 40 people at that wedding. Small and intimate apparently meant everyone except me. Michael, there were dozens of people there, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I saw the pictures. Jessica's parents, her siblings, your cousins, your college friends. How is that small and intimate? Another long pause, and when he spoke again, there was an edge of irritation in his voice that I'd never heard before when he talked to me. Look, Mom, we made the guest list based on who was local and available. You live 3 hours away, and we didn't want to inconvenience you with the travel. Inconvenience me? I would have driven across the country to be at his wedding. I would have crawled on my hands and knees if necessary. Honey, you could have called me, I said, tears now flowing freely down my cheeks. I would have dropped everything to be there. You're my only child, Michael. Your wedding day is one of the most important days of my life, too. The silence on his end was so long that I thought the call might have dropped. When he finally spoke, his words cut deeper than any knife ever could. Mom, honestly, we just wanted to keep it stress-free. You know how you can get sometimes. How I can get sometimes? What did that even mean? I was the most supportive mother I knew how to be. What do you mean, how I can get? I asked, my voice trembling with confusion and hurt. Michael sighed heavily, and I could picture him running his hand through his hair the way he always did when he was frustrated. You know, Mom, you worry too much about everything. You ask a lot of questions. You want to be involved in every detail. Jessica and I just wanted something simple without having to manage everyone's expectations. Manage everyone's expectations? I felt like he was talking about a stranger, not his mother who had given up everything to raise him. Michael, I'm not everyone, I said, my voice getting stronger despite the tears. I'm your mother. I changed your diapers. I stayed up all night when you had pneumonia. I worked 3 jobs to pay for your college. I think I've earned the right to at least know when my only child is getting married. I heard Jessica's voice in the background saying something about their flight boarding soon, and Michael's attention was clearly divided. Look, Mom, we're about to board. Can we talk about this when we get back? It's done now, so there's no point in making a big deal about it. No point in making a big deal about it? My son had just gotten married without telling me, and he thought there was no point in discussing it. When will you be back? I asked, grasping for any connection, any hope that we could fix this somehow. 2 weeks, he said quickly. Listen, I have to go. They're calling our boarding group. We'll talk when I get back, okay? And before I could respond, before I could tell him how much he had hurt me, before I could ask him to please just explain why I wasn't worth a phone call, the line went dead. I sat there holding my phone, staring at the screen that now showed call ended, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my entire life. But before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. What would you do in this situation? Have you ever been excluded from something important by someone you love? Leave me a comment and let me know, because what I discovered about my relationship with my son was about to get so much worse. The 2 weeks that followed were the longest of my life. I found myself obsessively checking Jessica's social media for updates from their honeymoon, torturing myself with photos of them snorkeling, dining at fancy restaurants, and exploring temples in Bali. Every picture showed them laughing and happy, completely unburdened by the pain they had caused me. Jessica posted daily updates with captions like, "Living our best life," and "Married life is amazing," while I sat in my empty house, wondering how I had become so irrelevant to my own son's happiness. I tried calling my sister Linda in Oregon, desperate to talk to someone who might understand, but when I explained what had happened, her response shocked me. "Well, Margaret, you have been pretty clingy lately," she said matter-of-factly. "Remember last Christmas when you called Michael 5 times in one day just to ask what time dinner was? And you did show up to his apartment unannounced that time when you thought he sounded sick on the phone." I felt like she had slapped me across the face. Was I really that bad? Was being concerned about my son's welfare the same as being clingy? After Linda's brutal honesty, I started questioning every interaction I'd had with Michael over the past few years. Maybe I did ask too many questions when he told me about his job. Maybe I did offer unsolicited advice about his finances. Maybe I did text him more often than other mothers texted their adult children. But even if all of that was true, did it justify excluding me from his wedding? Did being an overly concerned mother mean I deserved to find out about the most important day of his life through a Facebook post? I found myself walking through my house, looking at all the evidence of the close relationship I thought we had. The photo albums filled with pictures of our family vacations, the artwork he had made in elementary school that I still had hanging on my refrigerator, the college acceptance letter I had framed and kept on my mantle. Had I been living in a delusion? Had I created a fantasy relationship with my son while he was just tolerating my presence until he could build a life that didn't include me? But nothing could have prepared me for the conversation we had when he finally returned from his honeymoon. When Michael finally called me after returning from Bali, I had rehearsed what I wanted to say 100 times. I was going to be calm, rational, and mature. I was going to express my hurt without being accusatory, and hopefully, we could work through this misunderstanding and repair our relationship. But the moment I heard his voice, all my carefully planned words flew out the window. "Mom, before you start, I need to tell you something," he said, his tone serious in a way that made my stomach clench with dread. "Jessica and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if we take a break from our regular contact for a while." A break from our regular contact? I felt like the world was spinning around me. "What does that mean exactly?" I asked, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Michael cleared his throat uncomfortably. "It means maybe we talk once a month instead of every few days. Maybe we do holidays differently this year. Jessica feels like you've never really accepted her, and I can see her point. You've always been kind of cold toward her, and now you're making our wedding all about you instead of being happy for us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Cold toward Jessica? I had always been polite, always asked about her job and her family, always included her in invitations. And making their wedding about me? I was the one who had been excluded. "Michael, how am I making this about me?" I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I found out about your wedding on Facebook. I wasn't invited to the most important day of your life. How is that me making it about myself?" "See, this is exactly what Jessica was talking about," he said, and I could hear the frustration building in his voice. "You're being dramatic and guilt-tripping me instead of just being happy that I found someone I love. Other mothers would be thrilled that their son is happy and married, but you're making it all about how hurt you are." I felt like I was in some kind of alternate universe where up was down and wrong was right. Was wanting to be included in my son's wedding really that unreasonable? Before I continue with what happened next, I need to ask you something. Have you ever felt like someone was rewriting history to make you the villain? Comment below and tell me about a time when someone made you question your own reality, because what Michael said to me next would change everything I thought I knew about our relationship. "Michael, I just want to understand," I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay composed. "Can you please explain to me why Jessica's parents got to be there, why her siblings got to be there, why your college roommates got to be there, but your own mother wasn't even told it was happening?" The silence that followed was so long and uncomfortable that I wondered if he was trying to think of an excuse, or if he was finally realizing how cruel this whole situation was. When he finally spoke, his words hit me like a freight train. "Mom, honestly, Jessica's family doesn't create drama. They're just happy and supportive without making everything complicated. When we told them we wanted a small wedding, they said, 'Whatever makes you happy,' and helped us plan it. They didn't ask a million questions or try to take over or make suggestions about things that weren't their business." I felt like he was describing someone I didn't recognize. When had I ever tried to take over anything in his life? When had I created drama? "What drama have I ever created?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Give me one specific example of when I made something about myself or caused problems." Michael sighed heavily, like he was dealing with a difficult child. "Remember when Jessica and I moved in together and you kept asking if we were sure we were ready? Remember when I got my promotion and you worried out loud about whether the extra responsibility would stress me out? Remember when we bought the car and you questioned whether we could afford the payments?" Each example he gave felt like a punch to the gut because I remembered every single conversation he was referring to, but I remembered them completely differently. When he moved in with Jessica, I had asked if they were sure because I wanted them to be happy and successful. When he got promoted, I worried about his stress levels because I loved him and wanted him to take care of his health. When they bought an expensive car, I questioned the payments because I had learned the hard way what financial stress could do to a relationship. Michael, those weren't attempts to create drama, I said, tears flowing freely now. Those were the concerns of a mother who loves her son and wants him to be happy and safe. Since when is caring about someone the same as creating problems? But his response would reveal just how differently he saw my love than I had ever imagined. That's just it, Mom, Michael said, his voice taking on a tone I'd never heard before, cold and analytical, like he was explaining something to a stranger. You call it caring, but it feels like control. Every decision Jessica and I make, we have to prepare ourselves for your questions and your concerns and your suggestions. It's exhausting. We can't just be happy about something without wondering how you're going to react. I felt like he had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it stopped beating. Everything I had thought was love and concern, he saw as control and interference. But Michael, I'm your mother, I whispered, my voice barely audible. If I can't care about your decisions and your happiness, then what is my role in your life supposed to be? The question hung in the air between us, and I realized I was terrified of his answer. When he spoke, his words confirmed my worst fears. Maybe that's the problem, Mom. You need to figure out what your role is now that I'm an adult with my own family. Jessica is my priority now. Her feelings and her comfort come first. Her feelings and her comfort come first. Not our relationship as mother and son. Not the 26 years of history we shared. Not the fact that I had sacrificed everything to give him the best life possible. Jessica, who had known him for 2 years, now ranked higher in his priorities than the woman who had given birth to him and raised him single-handedly. So where does that leave me? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. It leaves you learning to be happy with less involvement in our lives, he said simply. Jessica and I are thinking about starting a family soon, and we want to do it without feeling like we're being watched and judged every step of the way. We want to make our own mistakes and celebrate our own successes without having to manage someone else's emotions about our choices. Starting a family? They were planning to have children, my future grandchildren, and they were already planning to limit my access to them? But before I share what I said next, let me pause and ask you something that's been weighing on my mind. When someone you love tells you that your love feels like control, how do you process that? Share your thoughts in the comments, because my response to Michael would determine the future of our relationship forever. Michael, if you and Jessica are planning to have children, are you saying that I won't be allowed to be a normal grandmother to them? The question came out of my mouth before I could stop it, but I needed to know just how far this exclusion was going to extend. The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. Mom, let's cross that bridge when we come to it. Right now, we just need some space to figure out our marriage without outside interference. Outside interference. That's what my love had become to him. That's what 26 years of devotion and sacrifice had been reduced to. Michael, I need you to help me understand something, I said, my voice getting stronger as a strange calm settled over me. When you were 8 years old and your father left us, who stayed up with you every night for 6 months because you had nightmares? When you wanted to play Little League but we couldn't afford the equipment, who worked double shifts at the diner to buy your glove and cleats? When you got into college but didn't qualify for enough financial aid, who took out a second mortgage on this house to pay your tuition? Mom, please don't. He started to interrupt, but I wasn't finished. For the first time in this entire conversation, I wasn't going to let him dismiss me or change the subject. When you graduated and couldn't find a job, who let you live here rent-free for 8 months while you figured things out? When you finally got your apartment but didn't have money for furniture, who gave you everything from my living room so you wouldn't have to sleep on the floor? When you met Jessica and wanted to impress her family, who helped you buy that expensive suit for their anniversary dinner? That's not fair, he said, his voice defensive now. I never asked you to sacrifice those things. You chose to do all of that. His words hit me like a physical blow because he was right. I had chosen to do all of those things. I had chosen to put his needs before my own for his entire life. I had chosen to love him more than I loved myself. And apparently, that choice had created a monster who saw my love as a burden and my concern as interference. You're absolutely right, Michael, I said. And something in my voice must have surprised him because he went completely quiet. I did choose to do all of those things. Just like you're choosing now to exclude me from your life. And just like you chose to get married without even telling me it was happening. The silence stretched between us, and I realized that this conversation was about to change everything. So, what are you saying, Mom? Michael asked. And for the first time since he'd called, there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. I looked around my living room at all the photos of him, at the empty furniture spaces where I'd given him my couch and coffee table, at the life I had built entirely around being his mother. I'm saying that if my love feels like control to you, and if my concern feels like interference, then maybe you're right. Maybe I do need to learn what my role is supposed to be now. What does that mean exactly? He asked, and I could hear something that might have been worry creeping into his voice. I took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside me that I didn't fully understand yet. It means that from now on, I'm going to respect your wishes. You want space? You'll have space. You want to make decisions without my input? You'll make them without my input. You want to build a life with Jessica that doesn't include regular contact with me? Then that's what you'll have. The silence on his end was so complete that I wondered if he had hung up on me. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded different, smaller somehow. Mom, you're being dramatic again. I'm not saying I never want to talk to you. I'm just saying we need some boundaries. Boundaries. Another word that felt like a knife twisting in an already open wound. No, Michael, I think you were very clear about what you want. You want a mother who doesn't ask questions, doesn't offer opinions, doesn't worry about your well-being, and doesn't expect to be included in important events in your life. That's not what I said, he protested. But we both knew it was exactly what he had said, just in different words. You want a mother who exists in the background, available when you need something, but invisible when you don't. Someone who loves you from a distance without expecting anything in return. My voice was steady now, calm in a way that surprised me. And you know what, son? You're going to get exactly what you asked for. What do you mean? He asked. And now there was definitely worry in his voice. But I wasn't ready to answer that question yet. First, I needed to tell him something that had been building inside me since the moment I saw his wedding photo on Facebook. Michael, for 26 years, I thought being your mother was the most important job I would ever have. I thought that loving you completely and putting your needs first was what good mothers did. I thought that staying involved in your life and caring about your happiness was not just my right, but my responsibility. I paused, looking at a photo of him on my mantle from his college graduation, both of us smiling, his arm around my shoulders, looking like the close family I thought we were. But I realize now that I've been doing it all wrong. I've been loving you the way I wanted to be loved, not the way you wanted to be loved. I've been trying to stay close to you when what you really wanted was distance. I've been offering support when what you really wanted was independence. Each word felt like I was pulling splinters out of my own heart, but I needed to say them. So I'm going to give you exactly what you want, even though it's going to kill me to do it. Mom, you're scaring me, he said, and I could hear genuine fear in his voice now. You're talking like you're going to do something drastic. I almost laughed at the irony. Now he was worried about my well-being. Now he was concerned about my mental state, when for months he had been planning a wedding that didn't include me and thinking that was perfectly reasonable. I'm not going to do anything drastic, Michael. I'm just going to stop doing the things that you've made it clear you don't want me to do anymore. I'm not going to call you every few days to check in. I'm not going to ask about your job or your health or your plans for the future. I'm not going to offer advice about your finances or your decisions. I'm not going to worry out loud about whether you're happy or stressed or taking care of yourself. But Mom, he started to protest, but I cut him off gently. And I'm definitely not going to expect to be included in important events in your life because you've shown me very clearly that my presence is more of a burden than a blessing. The words hung in the air between us, and I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line, like he was starting to understand the full implications of what he had asked for. You know what the saddest part is, Michael? I continued, my voice getting softer. I always thought that when you got married, it would be one of the happiest days of my life, too. I imagined walking you down the aisle since your father wasn't here to do it. I imagined crying happy tears as I watched you promise to love someone forever. I imagined dancing with you at your reception and telling you how proud I was of the man you had become. The tears were flowing freely now, but my voice remained steady. Instead, I found out about your wedding the same way I find out about celebrity marriages, through social media. I got to see photos of the most important day of your life after the fact, like a stranger who happened to follow you online. And when I tried to tell you how much that hurt, you made me feel like I was being unreasonable for wanting to be included. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, looking around my empty house. But you're right about one thing, son. I do need to figure out what my role is in your life now. And based on this conversation, I think that role is to be your mother from a distance. Someone who loves you quietly without expecting anything in return. Someone who exists in the background of your life without interfering in your happiness. The silence on his end was deafening, and I wondered if he was finally starting to understand what he had done. So, here's what's going to happen. I said, my voice taking on a tone of quiet determination. I'm going to change my phone number, and I'll give the new one to your Aunt Linda in case there's ever a real emergency. I'm going to delete my Facebook account so I don't accidentally see updates about your life that I'm not supposed to be part of. I'm going to stop sending birthday cards and Christmas gifts since you've made it clear that my involvement feels like control to you. Mom, stop, he said, his voice breaking. You're being ridiculous. I never said I didn't want you in my life at all. But we both knew that wasn't true. Maybe he hadn't said those exact words, but everything about his actions and his attitude had communicated that message loud and clear. Michael, I need you to really listen to me right now, I said, sitting down heavily in my kitchen chair. You married the woman you love without telling your mother it was happening. When I expressed hurt about that, you told me I was being dramatic and making it all about myself. You said my concern feels like control, and my love feels like interference. You told me that Jessica's comfort comes before our relationship. You said you want space and boundaries and less involvement from me in your life. I could hear him breathing on the other end, but he wasn't interrupting anymore. So I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. Complete freedom from my questions, my concerns, my opinions, and my presence. You wanted to build a life with Jessica without having to manage my emotions about your choices? Congratulations, son. You won't have to manage them anymore because I won't be sharing them with you. This isn't what I wanted, he said quietly. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, he sounded like the little boy I used to know. I just wanted some space, not for you to disappear from my life completely. I felt a spark of anger flare up in my chest. Anger at his selfishness. Anger at his inability to see how much he had hurt me. Anger at the fact that he still didn't understand what he had done. Space from what exactly? I asked. Space from a mother who loves you? Space from someone who has sacrificed everything for your happiness? Space from the only person in this world who will love you unconditionally for your entire life? My voice was rising now. All the hurt and rage I had been holding back finally spilling over. Because if that's the kind of space you need, then yes, I'm going to give it to you permanently. Mom, please, he said, and I could hear tears in his voice now. Can't we just find some middle ground here? Can't we figure out a way for me to have my marriage and for you to still be my mom? The question broke my heart all over again because the answer was so simple, and yet he had made it impossible. We could have found middle ground if you had included me in that conversation before you got married, I said, my voice heavy with sadness. We could have talked about boundaries and expectations and what kind of relationship would work for all of us. But you didn't want to have that conversation with me, Michael. You had it with Jessica instead. And together, you decided that the best solution was to exclude me entirely. I stood up and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the garden where I had taught him to plant tomatoes when he was 10 years old. You made a choice, son. You chose Jessica's comfort over my feelings. You chose avoiding a difficult conversation over including your mother in your wedding. You chose to let me find out about the most important day of your life through a Facebook post rather than a phone call. Each word felt like I was driving nails into the coffin of our relationship, but they needed to be said. I made those choices because I love you and I wanted you to be happy, he said, his voice desperate now. Everything I did was because I thought it would be easier for everyone. I almost laughed at the absurdity of his statement. Easier for everyone? Or easier for him because he didn't want to deal with the complexity of managing different people's needs and expectations. Michael, let me ask you something, I said, turning away from the window. When you were planning your wedding and making your guest list, did you ever think about me? Did you ever consider how I might feel about being excluded? Did it ever cross your mind that finding out through social media might hurt the woman who raised you? The silence that followed was longer than any pause in our entire conversation. When he finally answered, his voice was so quiet I could barely hear him. I thought about you, he said. But Jessica said her family would be upset if we had a big wedding, and I didn't want to start our marriage with conflict. And there it was, the truth that confirmed what I had suspected all along. When it came down to choosing between my feelings and Jessica's family's feelings, I hadn't even been a consideration. So you did think about me, I said, my voice eerily calm. You thought about me, and then you decided that avoiding potential conflict with Jessica's family was more important than including your own mother in your wedding. The weight of that decision, the cold calculation behind it, hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't been forgotten or overlooked. I had been deliberately excluded after careful consideration. It wasn't like that, he said quickly. But we both knew it was exactly like that. I was trying to keep everyone happy. Everyone except me, apparently. Everyone except the woman who had given up her own dreams and desires to make sure he had everything he needed to succeed in life. Michael, Do you have any idea what it feels like to realize that your only child considers you so unimportant that they can get married without even telling you? Mom, you're not unimportant to me, he said, but his words felt hollow after everything he had revealed. You're my mother. I love you. Love. He said he loved me, but love without respect, love without consideration, love without inclusion. What kind of love was that? If you love me, Michael, then help me understand how someone you love can be excluded from the most important day of your life. The question hung between us like a challenge, and I could hear him struggling to find an answer that would make sense to both of us. I didn't know how to handle it, he said finally. I knew you'd be hurt either way. If we had a small wedding without you, or if we had a bigger wedding and Jessica's family was uncomfortable. I thought it would be easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. Easier for whom? I wanted to scream. Easier for him, maybe, but devastating for me. So you chose to hurt me privately rather than risk hurting Jessica's family publicly, I said, and hearing it stated so plainly seemed to shock him into silence. You chose to protect their feelings while sacrificing mine. I made a mistake, he said, his voice breaking. I can see that now. But can't we move past this? Can't we find a way to fix it? But some things, once broken, can't be fixed. Some wounds, once inflicted, never fully heal. And some betrayals cut so deep that they change the fundamental nature of a relationship forever. Michael, I want you to imagine something for me, I said, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. I want you to imagine that 20 years from now, you have a son who grows up to be a man you're proud of. You sacrifice and struggle and pour your heart into raising him, just like I did for you. And then one day, he gets married without telling you, and when you express hurt about it, he tells you that your love feels like control, and your concern feels like interference. I could hear him crying softly on the other end of the line, and part of my heart ached for him even as the rest of it was breaking into pieces. I want you to imagine how that would feel, and then I want you to ask yourself if I made a mistake would be enough to heal that wound. If can't we move past this would be sufficient to rebuild that trust. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of everything that had been said, and everything that could never be unsaid. What do you want me to do? He asked finally, his voice small and defeated. How do I fix this? The question I had been waiting for him to ask, the opening I had hoped would come. But now that it was here, I realized that the damage might be too extensive to repair. I don't know if you can fix it, Michael. I don't know if I can trust you with my heart again after you've shown me how little it means to you. That's not fair, he said, his voice getting stronger. You're punishing me for one mistake. You're throwing away 26 years of relationship because I hurt your feelings about my wedding. Hurt my feelings? The casual dismissal of my pain, the reduction of this betrayal to mere hurt feelings, showed me that he still didn't understand the magnitude of what he had done. Michael, this isn't about hurt feelings, I said, my voice firm. This is about trust. This is about respect. This is about the fundamental way we see each other and our relationship. You've shown me that when it matters most, I'm not a priority in your life. You've shown me that my presence is optional, my feelings are secondary, and my role as your mother is negotiable. And that realization was about to lead me to a decision that would change both of our lives forever. I need you to understand something, Michael, I said, walking to my living room and looking at all the photos of our life together. For your entire life, you have been my everything. Every decision I made, every sacrifice I chose, every dream I gave up, it was all for you. My identity, my purpose, my happiness, it was all tied up in being your mother and making sure you had the best life possible. I picked up a photo of him from his high school graduation, both of us smiling proudly. But what I realize now is that while I was making you my whole world, you were making me a small part of yours. And that's not necessarily wrong. Children are supposed to grow up and build their own lives. But what is wrong is the way you've chosen to minimize my importance while still expecting me to be available whenever you need something. The photo felt heavy in my hands, like it represented a different lifetime when things were simpler. You want me to be the kind of mother who exists quietly in the background, who loves you without expectations, who supports you without questions, who celebrates your happiness from a distance without being included in it. And maybe that's the kind of mother you need now that you're married. I set the photo down and walked back to the kitchen, where this conversation had started and where it was about to end. But I can't be that mother, Michael, because I can't turn off 26 years of loving you completely. I can't pretend that your happiness doesn't matter to me. I can't stop worrying about your well-being or caring about your future. And I can't keep putting myself in a position where that love is seen as a burden rather than a gift. My voice was getting stronger now, filled with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. So I'm going to do something that's going to be incredibly hard for both of us, but especially for me. I'm going to love you enough to let you go completely. I'm going to give you the space you want, the freedom you need, and the distance you've asked for. And I'm going to do it permanently, not as a punishment, but as a gift. I could hear him starting to protest, but I continued before he could interrupt. You're going to get to live your life with Jessica without any interference from me. You're going to get to make your decisions without my questions. You're going to get to celebrate your successes and work through your failures without having to manage my emotions about them. You're going to get exactly what you said you wanted. The irony wasn't lost on me that in trying to protect our relationship, he had destroyed it completely. But Mom, he said, his voice desperate now, I don't want you out of my life forever. I just wanted some boundaries. I just wanted to be able to breathe without feeling like I was disappointing you all the time. His words revealed so much about how he had been feeling, but they also showed me how impossible our situation had become. If my love felt like pressure to him, if my concern felt like judgment, then maybe distance was the only kindness I could offer. Michael, I need you to understand that this isn't about punishment, I said softly. This is about acceptance. I'm accepting that the kind of mother-son relationship I wanted isn't the kind you need. I'm accepting that my love, however well-intentioned, has become a burden to you. And I'm accepting that sometimes loving someone means letting them go, even when it breaks your heart to do it. The silence that followed was the heaviest of our entire conversation. I could hear him breathing, could almost feel him struggling to find words that would somehow undo everything that had been said. Some magic phrase that would put us back where we were before his wedding photo appeared on my Facebook feed. But we both knew that was impossible. You can't unknow what you know, and you can't unfeel what you've felt. What about grandchildren? He asked suddenly, his voice breaking on the words. What about when Jessica and I have kids? You're just going to walk away from them too? The question hit me like a physical blow because I hadn't allowed myself to think that far ahead. The idea of grandchildren I would never meet, birthdays I wouldn't celebrate, Christmas mornings I wouldn't share. It was almost unbearable. Michael, if you and Jessica have children, they will be lucky to have you as parents, I said, my voice trembling with the effort of staying strong. And if you want them to know their grandmother, you know where to find me. But I won't insert myself into their lives the way I apparently inserted myself into yours. I won't risk being told that my love for them feels like control, or that my concern for their well-being feels like interference. You're being cruel, he said, anger creeping into his voice for the first time. You're punishing innocent children for mistakes I made. His accusation stung because part of me wondered if he was right. Was I being vindictive? Was I letting my hurt override my love? But then I remembered the photo on Facebook, the secret planning, the casual dismissal of my pain, and I knew that I was simply protecting myself from further heartbreak. I'm not punishing anyone, Michael. I'm protecting myself from a pattern that you've already established. You've shown me that when it's convenient, you include me, and when it's not, you exclude me. You've shown me that my feelings are secondary to your comfort, and that my presence is optional in your life. I paused, looking around my empty house one more time. I can't live like that anymore. I can't keep setting myself up to be hurt by someone I love more than my own life. So this is it? He asked, his voice hollow. This is how our relationship ends? Because I made one mistake about my wedding? The fact that he still saw this as one mistake, that he still didn't understand the deeper issues this had revealed about how he saw me and our relationship, confirmed that I was making the right decision. This is how our relationship ends because you've shown me that I don't matter to you the way you matter to me, I said simply. That's not true, he protested, but we both knew it was. If I had mattered to him the way he mattered to me, I would have been at his wedding. If my feelings had been important to him, he would have found a way to include me that worked for everyone. If our relationship had been precious to him, he wouldn't have risked it so carelessly. Michael, I want you to be happy. I want your marriage to be everything you dreamed it would be. I want you to build a beautiful life with Jessica. Then why are you doing this? He asked, his voice breaking with desperation. If you want me to be happy, why are you cutting me out of your life? The answer was simple, even though saying it was going to destroy me. Because your happiness doesn't depend on me anymore, son. You've made that very clear. But my sanity, my self-respect, and my emotional well-being depend on me learning to live without constantly hoping for a relationship that you don't want. I walked to my front door and looked out at the street where he used to ride his bicycle as a child, where I taught him to drive when he turned 16, where he used to bring his friends to play basketball in our driveway. I'm going to hang up now, Michael. I'm going to change my phone number tomorrow, and I'm going to start figuring out who I am when I'm not your mother. It's going to be the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's what you've asked for, and it's what I need to do to survive this. Mom, please, he said, crying openly now. Please don't do this. We can work it out. We can find a way to make this better. But some things can't be worked out, and some wounds cut too deep to heal. Some betrayals reveal truths that can't be unknown, and some relationships can't survive the weight of those revelations. I love you, Michael, I said, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. I have loved you every single day of your life, and I will love you every single day of mine. But I can't keep putting myself in a position where that love is unwanted, unappreciated, and seen as a burden. I deserve better than that, even if it means I have to be alone. The words felt like I was pronouncing my own death sentence, but they also felt like the first honest thing I had said in years. You taught me something important today, son. You taught me that love without respect isn't really love at all. It's just need disguised as affection. And you taught me that I've been so afraid of losing you that I forgot to value myself. I closed my eyes, memorizing the sound of his voice because I knew this might be the last time I ever heard it. I hope someday you understand that this conversation wasn't about your wedding. It was about how you see me, how you value me, and how you treat the people who love you most. I wish things could have been different, I continued, my voice getting softer. I wish we could have had the kind of relationship where you felt comfortable talking to me about boundaries instead of simply excluding me. I wish you had trusted me enough to believe that I would have supported whatever kind of wedding would have made you and Jessica happy, as long as I was invited to share in your joy. The silence on his end told me he was finally beginning to understand what he had lost. Take care of yourself, Michael. Take care of Jessica. Build a beautiful life together and don't spend too much time regretting the choices that brought you here. You got what you wanted, freedom from my interference, space from my concerns, and independence from my love. I hope it brings you the happiness you're looking for. My hand was shaking as I prepared to hang up the phone and end 26 years of being someone's whole world. Goodbye, son, I whispered. And before he could respond, before he could say anything that might weaken my resolve, I hung up the phone and turned it off completely. I sat in my kitchen in the silence I had chosen, surrounded by the emptiness I had accepted, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something that might have been peace. It was going to be a long road learning to live for myself instead of through someone else, but it was a road I was finally ready to walk. Sometimes the people we love most teach us the hardest lessons about our own worth. Sometimes we have to lose everything to realize we never really had it in the first place. And sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go, even when it destroys us to do it. Margaret's story reminds us that being a parent doesn't mean accepting disrespect, and that love without boundaries isn't healthy for anyone involved. Her son asked for space, and she gave him exactly what he requested, just more permanently than he expected. What do you think about Margaret's decision? Was she right to cut contact completely, or should she have tried to work things out with Michael? Have you ever had to make a choice between your self-respect and a relationship with someone you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective on this heartbreaking situation. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that explore the complex dynamics of family relationships. Sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that force us to examine our own lives and relationships.